I'd like to particularly welcome Supervisor Dan Stork, who is here standing with us. In addition, I want to welcome Mount Vernon's Coalition to Save George Washington's View partners, the Accokeek Foundation, the Alice Ferguson Foundation, the American Battlefield Trust, the Chesapeake Conservancy, the Cultural Landscape Foundation, the Garden Club of America, the Mayone Reserve, the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the Neighborhood Friends of Mount Vernon, Preservation Maryland, and Preservation Virginia. Now, as Mrs. Colson just noted, this extraordinary view behind me is something that has been protected and defended by the Mount Vernon Ladies Association since the 1960s. It does not just happen to be one of the most beautiful sites in the region, but it's one of the most significant sites in the nation. And it was preserved, and it is actively preserved by the Ladies Association. It didn't just happen to stay this way. And now, I'm sad to say, it's under threat. Now, the Ladies Association, Mount Vernon, does not regularly like to try to create a crisis environment. We don't hold a lot of press conferences. We are a deliberative educational institution. We love to spend our time preserving this historic estate and educating the 1 million visitors a year who come here and the millions more online. That view behind us is an essential part of that education and preservation mission. It connects all our visitors to George Washington in a direct, visceral way. His love of this extraordinary place and the view that he contemplated when setting out on his revolutionary journey to secure independence and to create a more perfect union. But now this tremendous resource saved for our country by the Ladies Association and our partners for the last 60 years is under threat from the development project by Dominion Energy. The compressor station that they want to build is part of their natural gas pipeline efforts within Charles County and beyond, directly across the river. We believe it is unnecessary to be in that location. It's a location that does not make any sense, and the Mount Vernon Ladies Association opposes it and hopes very much that Dominion can find a more suitable location that is outside of this historic viewshed. Dominion will argue that the compressor station will not be seen from Mount Vernon, so not to worry. But they can't guarantee that. They haven't had final permitting on the shape of their building nor the height of its stacks. And their promises to us are not binding. They cannot guarantee that emissions from the station cannot be seen. They cannot guarantee that the industrial development will not have a long-term negative impact on the forest canopy which protects that view. And they're building this station within 40 feet of the boundary of the Piscataway National Park, a park that was created by the American people in 1961, which has a mission specifically to preserve the view of George Washington's Mount Vernon, 40 feet from that park boundary. They're building this compressor station in an area that's zoned in Charles County as a rural conservation zone, and the people there have opposed it for being in that zone. Charles County denied the permit, the special permit that was needed to build in that zone on the grounds that there's not appropriate fire safety infrastructure, that it's in a wetland area that will need to be dewatered before they can even construct the facility, and that too many questions persist about the plans and impact of the building. Now, to the county's opposition, Dominion has answered with a federal lawsuit. They will try to litigate their way to the outcome that they desire. The authority to ignore the local zoning that Dominion claims from the permitting they received from the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, the FERC. An exemption we believed is compromised by an inadequate consultation process. Now, one might ask why Dominion would pursue local zone permissions if they intended to ignore local opinion expressed through a democratic process, but that is beside the point. Before permitting these types of projects, FERC is required by Section 106 of the National Historic Preservation Act to include historic properties and their assets, which are threatened by the project. Public consultation is a key ingredient in the Section 106 rule, and it didn't happen in this case. Mount Vernon was never asked to be a consulting partner, and as Mount Vernon is a National Historic Landmark, there is a special process for evaluating resources, the viewshed, associated with the landmark. Piscataway National Park was never asked to be a consulting partner, nor was George Washington Memorial Parkway National Park. This is an issue because the interstate pipeline affects both parks. The National Registry boundary for Piscataway National Park that was used in the FERC process was a boundary marker that was incomplete, and did not include additions to the park that happened in 1999 and 2001. To be clear, 1265 Old Landing Road and 6870 Berries Hill Road, added in 2001. The latter is 40 feet from the proposed site and would suffer from the adverse effects of the compressor station. Now, let me be clear. The Dominion Energy Compressor Station has never been approved by the Mount Vernon Ladies Association, and there's no size of compressor that we would be happy with being put in this rural area. We fundamentally believe that this kind of industrial development, which goes through without local approval, will ultimately generate more development, which goes through without local approval. If it can't be stopped now, how could it be stopped in the future? Now, maybe Dominion won't do anything in a year or two, as they've promised, and they won't expand the site over time. But they've done that in other places. In Loudoun County, the compressor station has grown, and they said it wouldn't. And what will happen in 10 years or 20 years? The Ladies Association has defended this view for 60 years, and we intend to defend it for 60 more and beyond. They can't guarantee that this development won't lead to more. Dominion Energy can move their compressor station. We can't move Mount Vernon. Now, we're not against development. We're in favor of smart development, as we know that Dominion Energy is, and our political friends in Maryland are, and the people of Maryland, and everybody who cares about what is preserved for future generations. And there's a smart way to end this. Now, just this morning, our friends at the National Trust for Historic Preservation have named this view as one of the 11 most endangered historic places in the country. And that's a scary list to be on, particularly as an institution that works very hard every day to maintain this 18th century wooden structure from the variables of weather and change. So we have a lot of work to do, and we need your help to move this compressor station along. Now, to Dominion, I would say choose a different spot of ground, not this sacred view. Sometimes the right decision is a difficult one, and we stand ready with our friends to help you find a more suitable location in a properly zoned area to make this right decision as easy as possible and to help ease the pain of a challenging move. For Marylanders, I would say this is the most famous view of your beautiful state. It's seen by 1 million people a year who visit Mount Vernon, by tens of millions who commute on the George Washington Memorial Parkway and see the pristine expanse of the Potomac curving along your shore. Let your neighbors and your public servants know this is under threat. Encourage them to try to find a more suitable location for this industrial development. For Virginians, the Old Dominion, I would say, you dearly love your history of your state and depend upon historic and cultural tourism. Know that George Washington's home, which asks for little from you and is one of your most storied and important sites, needs your help. Tell your public officials and your friends that we want this viewshed preserved at all costs. And for Americans, this is your first president's view, preserved in sacred trust by the Ladies Association for 160 years in a place unlike any in the country. It cannot be replicated. It cannot be replaced once it is lost. Let your public servants know this is a national cause. Now, this is the view that over 87 million people have enjoyed together as visitors to the home of the father of their country. It's the same view that George Washington and Rochambeau viewed when they contemplated final victory at Yorktown in the War for American Independence. It's a view enjoyed by Woodrow Wilson 100 years ago this year when he laid out his ideas for a new world after the Great War that would be based upon peace and the rule of law. It's the view enjoyed by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Winston Churchill as they prepared to unite in a special relationship in a war against fascism in World War II. It's the view that John F. Kennedy and Jackie Kennedy enjoyed at their famous state dinner in 1961 with a tent designed by Tiffany's, when they brought glamour again to Mount Vernon and hosted the president of Pakistan to celebrate the birth of a new democracy in the world. It was the view enjoyed by the late First Lady Barbara Bush and Mrs. Nanya Yeltsin when they stood hand in hand and celebrated the end of the Cold War and the beginning of a new possibility. And most recently, it is the view enjoyed by President and First Lady Trump when the Regent and I stood with them 2 months ago on the piazza at the occasion of the first state visit of President of France, Emmanuel Macron, and Mrs. Macron, and we all spoke together of the extraordinary beauty of the view, the work that we'd done to preserve it, and the possibilities that can be imagined by such a view. Now, at a time when Americans are struggling to find common ground, the importance and special inspirational beauty of this view is something that we can all agree upon. and have agreed upon for 50 years since the creation of the Piscataway National Park. Let's work together in the common interest to save that view. And finally, when I think about this view, I think about George Washington's challenge to all of us. And when he came back to Mount Vernon, what he called his own vine and fig tree at the end of the American Revolutionary War, he told the country that the hardest part was yet to come. Winning independence was the beginning. It's what we do with it that matters. History is a long sequence of choices by individuals and groups that have made, the choices they've made. It's not an inevitable list of facts that you have to memorize. It's the understanding that we're the ones shaping the future, just as our present was shaped by people in our past. As George Washington said, millions unborn would be affected by the choices of the revolutionary generation. We are those millions that are affected by the great choices that the founders of our country made. The choices that we make will affect this generation and the next generation to come, and millions more. The choices the Ladies Association made to defend that viewshed in the 1950s and 60s affects our lives today. And the viewshed's future will be affected by the choices we make and Dominion Energy makes and all of you make. So let's work together to make sure we can get this thing moved to another location.